Idel. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the Russians launched a huge offensive on the northeastern front and actually made attacks along the whole front down to the Romanian border. But these attacks gained little ground for tens of thousands of casualties. The British advanced in German East Africa, while at Verdun, the carnage continued near Aboukir, where attack and counterattack produced nothing but corpses. Okay, the history and the fortress of Verdun. Back in Roman times, Virodunum was already a fortified camp, once sacked by Attila the Hun. The Treaty of Verdun in 843 was signed by the three sons of Louis the Pious, the heirs of Charlemagne. This resulted in the creation of the medieval German kingdom, which was the largest part of the Holy Roman Empire, as well as the Kingdom of France itself. Look it up. Good stuff. Now, the treaty made Verdun part of France, but in 923, it fell under Germanic rule and remained that way for over 600 years. After becoming French again, it was pretty much besieged once a century until 1916. In 1870, it was the last fortress to fall to the Prussians in the Franco-Prussian War. The fortress of Verdun was now supposedly the strongest one on Earth, and its reputation had indeed been tested at the Battle of the Marne. German forces had nearly encircled it, and French Commander-in-Chief Joseph Joffre ordered it to be abandoned. But Maurice Thorel, who's now the French commander in Salonika, disregarded the orders. The fortress withstood repeated German attacks and was the anchor and pivot point for the French retreat to Paris, where they finally stopped the German advance. Had it fallen in 1914, it's reasonably likely that Paris and the war would have been lost. The front of Verdun now formed a salient, which you might think wasn't easily defensible, but on all sides, steep hills surrounded it, making huge natural forts. Many of these hills had gentle slopes toward the invaders' side, but steep reverse slopes, perfect for Frenchmen to hide behind, then spring out to sweep an enemy with machine gun fire. The crest of each fort hill also had its own fort. This was the outstanding feature of the Verdun defenses. If you look at the German map from 1914, there were a full 20 major forts and 40 more minor forts listed at Verdun. On the right bank, the forts were sorted in an outer and two inner rings. The outer was where Forts Douaumont and Vaux lay. The innermost was on the height, overlooking Verdun, with Belleville and Saint-Michel. On the left bank, there were two lines, and the most important of these was the outer one, that was 5 forts along the Bois-Bourou ridge. Each fort was situated so it could fire on any enemy approaching its neighbor, right? The guns were under heavy steel shells in retractable turrets, so it could only really be taken out by a direct artillery hit. There were machine gun turrets and flanking blockhouses, and the bigger ones could hold a company of infantry underground, who were often protected with reinforced concrete and earth up to 3 meters deep. The most powerful fort, the cornerstone of the whole thing, was Fort Douaumont, which had fallen in February to the Germans without firing a shot. But Fort Vaux, perhaps second in importance, still remained resolutely in French hands. Now, back at the beginning of the war, in August 1914, the great Belgian fortresses like Liège and Namur had fallen quickly to modern artillery, and it seemed like the lesson was that fortresses were a thing of the past. However, the French and Germans were learning that that lesson was not carved in stone, and fortifications, even old ones, could in fact stand up to an intense artillery bombardment, even a prolonged one, and could even back up French lines if the fortress was occupied by troops prepared to sit out the shelling and wait for an assault by unprotected infantry. In a way, it was inexperience that was the downfall of the Belgians a year and a half ago. But the French would now doggedly stick through the barrages and then repay the German infantry with a wall of small arms fire. And on the left bank of the Meuse, the French tactical advantage was growing. The woods and broken country so favorable to the Germans had been blasted out of existence the past month, and it was now open country. The German flamethrowers were now suicide machines, because as soon as you lit up in the open, you'd get shot. And when the fuel canisters were hit by shrapnel, they would turn the guy using the flamethrower into a human torch. But an even bigger problem was flanking fire from the French that stopped the Germans every time they advanced on open ground. The Germans had tried to eliminate those flanking guns by spreading the attack across the Meuse, but now that attack was getting hit from French guns on its right from a ridge that was a twin of the Morton called Côte 304. So now, the Germans, after the costly failure of attacks on the Morton 3 weeks ago, decided that they wouldn't get anywhere until they took Côte 304. The fighting to get there would happen at the extreme western edge of the Verdun salient, between the villages of Malancourt and Avocourt. On the 28th, the Germans attacked Malancourt village, which fell days later. But on the 29th, the French attacked in the Avocourt wood. French military writer Lieutenant Colonel Henri de Malloret led the attack. He retook part of the wood, but was killed, having both of his legs severed. Here are a few numbers of the first month of Verdun. By the end of March, casualties at Verdun were 89,000 French and 81,607 German. And because of the compressed area of battle, senior commanders were dying as quickly as the lower ranks. One French division had 3 of its 4 colonels killed just this month. Horses were also dying at a rapid clip, 7,000 in one day by long-range shelling. And what amounted to an entire division of men was needed to keep the sacred road, French supply route, going and bring 50,000 tons of supplies and 90,000 men a week. Now that's a lot of men, so let's compare it to what's happening on the Eastern Front. On March 26th, the Russian Fifth Army lost 28,000 men on the Northern Front. The Russian Lake Naroc offensive, aimed at Vilna, was in its second week, and managed to throw away huge advantage in men and artillery. When I say huge, I mean the Russians had 300,000 men there to only 180,000 Germans. The Russian artillery was still not coordinated with the infantry very well, which you really saw with teams like the Second Army attacking and running into its own artillery fire. And then, when it had taken a salient, German guns bombarded it from 3 sides. 3/4 of the infantry, 15,000 men, were lost in just 8 hours. But the offensive continued all week until the thaw, the 29th, suspended operations. And at home in Russia was more disturbing news for the Allies. On March 29th, Alexei Polivanov resigned as Russian Minister of War. Well, I say resigned, but really he was dismissed by the Tsar under heavy pressure from the Tsarina and Rasputin. Polivanov was the guy responsible for rebuilding the Russian army after last year's disaster. This was a big blow. He was replaced by Dmitry Zhuvayev, whom the Tsarina would also work against. And here are some naval notes to round out the week. March 23rd, a German sub sank the Folkestone DF ferry Sussex, which saw 50 passengers drowned, including Spanish composer Eduardo Granado. On March 30th, the French hospital ship Portugal, in Russian service with a French crew, was torpedoed in the Black Sea by German sub U-33. 115 patients, doctors, nurses, and crew drowned. Total Allied shipping losses for March were 76,769 tons. And that was the week. Enormous casualties at Lake Naroc, enormous casualties at Verdun, and civilians and medical staff being torpedoed at sea. We've seen enormous death tolls often during the war, but they were more often on the Eastern Front than any other theater of war, and most often Russian. But now we see a new phenomenon. Casualties on the Western Front as high as those in the East. Although in theory, one life is as valuable as any other, Russia had seemingly endless amounts of men, but Germany and France, by comparison, certainly did not. What would that mean for them? Losing astronomical and irreplaceable numbers of the cream of their youth for no appreciable gain. Would it continue? Of course it would continue. Month after month after month. This was modern war. Germany had already once sent young and inexperienced, totally fresh troops into battle at Ypres and paid the price for it. Even the enemy British soldiers were shocked by the slaughter. If you want to find out more about the battle that created the Langemarck legend, click right here. Our Patreon supporter of the week is Devin Knoll. Help us make the show better and support us on Patreon. That's what Devin did, and we greatly improve the quality of our animation since then. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. It's now springtime, 1960. Away from the battlefields of Europe, people look to the sky to see the sun shining brightly above, And this week, if you were in England, you also saw something else. For this week, the skies were alive with German Zeppelins. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the French and the Germans kept duking it out at the western edge of the Verdun battleground. A Russian offensive was halted by spring thaws in the northeast, but not before the Russians took tens of thousands of casualties for pretty much no territory. And civilians and medical staff were being torpedoed and drowned at sea. But this week saw a lot more in the skies than at sea. A series of Zeppelin raids daily from March 31st to April 5th blanketed just about the entire eastern and northeastern coast of England, and even reached as far as Leith and Edinburgh in Scotland. Nearly 100 civilians were killed, and over 200 more were injured. The story of the Great War has this to say about the raids. There is every reason to believe the main object of the raids was to discover the whereabouts of the main British battleship fleet. However, the airships seem to have returned southward before locating the fleet. The German Admiralty never gave up hope of locating the main base with certainty, for many Zeppelin and submarine raids were made with no other object in view. Had the ships succeeded, there is no doubt that all available submarines would have been dispatched to the spot, ordered to lie in wait, and then enticed the fleet out by offering a couple of older ships as a sacrifice. The plan did not work out to the satisfaction of the German Navy heads, but it still remains one of their pet hopes. But it wasn't just the skies over Britain that were alive. On April 4th, a huge aerial battle took place over Ancona between more than 20 Austro-Hungarian and Italian planes. 3 Austrian planes were shot down, and 2 Italian planes were severely damaged. The next day, the Germans issued a resume of March aerial action, claiming that 44 British and French planes were lost that month, and only 14 German. And on April 7th, Bulgarian and Austrian planes bombed Salonika, causing great damage to the French and Australian camps where large fires broke out. Actually, last week, on March 27th, 7 German planes had attempted a bombing run on British and French warships at Salonika Harbor, but Allied guns shot 4 of them down. They did drop some bombs though. 20 Greek civilians were killed. This provoked huge anti-German sentiment throughout Greece, and anti-neutrality editorials in the press, and at the funerals of the victims, large crowds chanted, "Down with the Germans." Martial law was even considered. But Greece was in a state of mobilization, and it had some real negative side effects. Former Prime Minister Eleutherios Venizelos had this to say: "By keeping this country in a state of chronic peaceful war through purposeless mobilization, the present government has brought Greece to the verge of economic, material, and moral bankruptcy." Here is a related quote that has to do with the economic situation in Greece at the time, made to a press correspondent by a government official. "Greece is much more likely to be starved into the war than Germany is to be starved out of it." It is true that the Greek budget for the year had expenditures that were twice that of revenue. The streets of Athens were now crawling with beggars, and inflation was rampant. The mobilization had also caused unforeseen problems, like that with the fishermen. Since most of them were with the armed forces, fish, normally one of the main food supplies, was now too expensive for tens of thousands of families. Meanwhile, far to the east, it was soldiers that were going hungry. Specifically, the British and Indian